Welcome to Bedtime Finance Stories. Tonight's episode is titled The Untold Calm of Mortgage Freedom. Bedtime Finance Story. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the noise of the day has faded, we turn to a gentle story of endurance, patience, and release. This is not a tale of sudden wealth, nor of quick victories. It is the slow unfolding of freedom earned through years of steady steps. We will walk together through borrowed walls, long seasons of repayment, and the subtle weight of obligations carried faithfully. And then we will arrive at the moment of release, the calm that follows when the final burden is lifted, and a home truly becomes one's own. Let this story settle softly into your thoughts, guiding you toward rest and reminding you that even in finance, there can be peace, patience, and serenity. Now, let us begin. The Untold Calm of Mortgage Freedom. Bedtime Finance Story. The Untold Calm of Mortgage Freedom. The Weight of Borrowed Walls. The story begins quietly, with a small house standing on a quiet street. It was not large, not grand, yet to Lena it was both haven and burden. The home was hers in name, but not yet in freedom. Each month she wrote the same numbers, signed the same checks, and watched the lender's name pull a piece of her labor away. The mortgage was not only a contract, it was a shadow that followed her into every decision. She remembered the day she signed it. The banker's office smelled faintly of paper and ink, and the pen was heavy in her hand. The words 30 years looked almost endless. She had smiled then because the dream of owning a home was more powerful than the weight of the years. Yet over time she learned that dreams often sit beside duties. The first years were steady. Payments went out, wages came in, and the balance slowly shifted downward. But as years stretched on, interest loomed like an unseen fog. She realized how much of her effort was absorbed not by the walls she lived within, but by the mathematics of debt. Still, she pressed forward. The home sheltered her, and in quiet nights she whispered promises to herself that one day it would truly be hers. Outside her window, seasons rotated, leaves turned gold and fell, winters wrapped the roof in silence, springs brought soft rains. The mortgage remained through all of it, unchanged, patient, as though reminding her that freedom was never free, and calm could only be built by long persistence. Reflection. Debt can anchor us, yet within the weight lies a rhythm, steady steps toward freedom. The rhythm of repayment. Lena grew used to the repetition. Each paycheck carried the mark of obligation. She budgeted carefully, sorting coins and numbers like a gardener tending soil. She cut back on luxuries, allowed herself fewer outings, and chose the slower path of patience. The mortgage, in its own way, disciplined her. She learned to measure not just money, but desire. She questioned purchases, delayed gratification, and found calm in restraint. Some friends wondered why she lived so modestly when she could chase brighter lights. But Lena understood that every small choice whispered into the larger future. During long evenings, she kept a ledger by hand. The slow motion of writing down figures gave her a strange comfort. Over time, she began to see patterns, like tides moving in and out. Her debts shrank little by little. Though invisible to others, the quiet progress became her private meditation. Interest still claimed a portion, like a toll collected on a bridge she crossed again and again. Yet she saw that persistence was stronger than tolls. Each payment, no matter how small it felt, shortened the road. She began to realize that mortgage freedom was not a single moment of victory, but the quiet accumulation of hundreds of ordinary days lived with intention. Reflection. Freedom grows not from leaps, but from the steady cadence of repeated steps. Storms and steadiness. Not every season was gentle. There came a downturn in the economy, when neighbors lost jobs and homes fell into foreclosure. Fear rippled across the town like a cold wind. For Lena, the payments felt heavier during those years. Her salary stood still while costs around her rose. There were days when she wondered if she would falter. Yet she kept her gaze steady. She adjusted, cut deeper, and held on to the essentials. She found peace in simplicity, meals cooked at home, walks instead of travels, evenings lit by soft lamps rather than outings. The house, though burdened with debt, also gave her roots. It reminded her that storms pass, and steady hands guide the vessel through. She learned to see her mortgage not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It asked patience, endurance, and consistency. These virtues, though born from necessity, became part of her. When friends despaired, she reminded them gently, "Every storm is temporary." What matters is that we do not stop rowing reflection. In the silence of endurance, storms become chapters, not destinies. The slow diminishing shadow. Years passed. Lena's ledger grew thick with pages, each line a memory of sacrifice. She began to notice something subtle. The interest was shrinking. More of her money now touched the principal. The shadow of debt, once long and consuming, began to recede. She felt a quiet thrill each time she saw the numbers tilt more in her favor. It was not the thrill of winning a lottery, but the deeper calm of progress earned. She thought of the house as a partner now, one that demanded much but gave back shelter, stability, and a growing sense of security. Neighbors came and went, some selling under pressure, some moving to larger houses with larger debts. Lena chose instead to stay rooted. She believed in finishing what she began. Her home was not about comparison, but about completion. The sound of pens scratching across paper each month became less heavy, almost musical. The chain that once rattled at her ankle now felt lighter. She dreamed of the day she would walk into her home knowing it was entirely hers. No bank, no contract, only freedom. Reflection. Patience carves away the weight of obligation until only freedom remains. The moment of release. It came one morning, quietly. Lena walked into the bank with a final envelope. The numbers inside were not large compared to years of payments, but they carried the weight of decades. She handed them across the counter, signed one last line, and felt the air shift around her. The teller smiled, stamped the document, and said words that seemed almost unreal. "Your mortgage is closed." Lena stepped outside into sunlight. The world looked the same, yet every detail shimmered with difference. The house waiting down the street was now hers in truth. No interest, no obligation, only walls that belonged entirely to her. That night, she sat on the floor of her living room. She touched the wooden boards, ran her hand along the walls, and whispered thanks. She realized that freedom does not shout. It hums. It does not arrive like thunder. It comes like a slow dawn, filling spaces with calm light. Reflection. True freedom is quiet. It is the gentle release of a burden carried faithfully to its end. The untold calm, life after mortgage. Freedom did not transform into sudden luxury. Instead, it settled into a deeper calm. With no payment chasing her, Lena discovered a new rhythm. She saved more easily, traveled with lighter steps, and gave without fear. Her choices were no longer filtered through the lens of obligation. She reflected often on the journey. The discipline of debt had shaped her, the storms had tested her, and the slow march of time had delivered her into peace. She saw clearly now that the calm of mortgage freedom was not only about owning walls, it was about owning herself. On quiet evenings, she sat by the window with tea, watching seasons move as they always had. But now, each falling leaf, each soft rain, belonged to her in a way they never had before. Her home was no longer half shadow, half promise. It was wholly hers, and in that wholeness, she found serenity. Reflection. In the stillness of freedom, we discover not wealth alone, but the calm of truly belonging. Beyond the walls, a new chapter of freedom. The years that followed brought a new kind of rhythm. Without the mortgage, Lena felt as though a silent chain had been removed. Her income, once divided and pre-committed, now arrived whole, waiting for her decision. At first, she found it strange. She had lived so long within the structure of repayment that the absence of it created a new, quiet space. She did not rush to fill it with indulgence. Instead, she treated her newfound freedom with the same patience that had carried her through debt. She built an emergency fund, a cushion that gave her nights of deeper rest. She invested in small ways, government bonds, index funds, tools of stability rather than risk. Each decision reflected the lessons learned during years of restraint. Her home, now free of obligation, began to carry a different meaning. The creak of the floorboards, once reminders of endless payments, now felt like music of ownership. She noticed the sunlight in the kitchen more tenderly, as though even light itself acknowledged her freedom. Neighbors still lived under mortgages, some beginning, some midway, some struggling under the weight of rising rates. Lena shared her calm with them not through advice shouted, but through example lived. Her story reminded them that debt, though heavy, could be carried to its end. On certain nights, she would open her old ledger and trace the pages. Each line of repayment was a scar, but also a step. She realized then that the mortgage had not merely been about the house. It had been about building her character, her steadiness, her relationship with time itself. As she closed the book and placed it gently on the shelf, she whispered to herself, "The house is free, but so am I." Reflection. Freedom does not end with the last payment. It unfolds in every choice that follows. The memory of sacrifice. Even in freedom, Lena carried memories of the long years of repayment. They would visit her quietly, like echoes. When she stood in the grocery aisle and chose to compare prices, she remembered the days when every coin mattered. When she declined unnecessary purchases, she recalled the discipline that debt had forced upon her. She understood now that the mortgage had been more than a financial contract. It had been a shaping of habits, a slow carving of her character. Without it, she might never have discovered the calm strength that came from choosing patience over impulse. The memory of sacrifice did not burden her. It gave her gratitude. Each cup of tea in her kitchen, each night of undisturbed sleep in her own bed, reminded her of the years when such calm was bought at the cost of restraint. Sacrifice, once heavy, had turned into a soft companion. She often thought of people who saw debt only as chains. She wished they could see what she had learned, that within hardship there lies hidden wealth, not wealth measured only in money, but in wisdom, endurance, and a peace that lingers even after the debt is gone. Reflection. The weight we once carried becomes light when we see how it shaped our strength. The quiet growth of wealth. With no monthly payments draining her, Lena began to notice how money, once released, could quietly multiply. She saved steadily, not with haste, but with a gentle rhythm that matched her life. She invested modestly, avoiding grand risks, choosing instead the slow and steady growth of compounded time. Wealth grew like a tree in her garden. She did not sit and watch each leaf, but trusted that patience would turn small seeds into shade. What surprised her most was not the accumulation itself, but the calm it brought. She no longer felt pressed by the future. She could breathe more slowly, dream more widely. Her home, fully paid, became an anchor of stability. While others worried about rent, rising interest, or uncertain housing markets, she sat within walls that asked nothing of her. She realized that true wealth was not measured in numbers alone, but in the freedom of choice, in the ability to say no, in the gentle power of enough. As her savings grew, Lena did not chase luxury. Instead, she sought balance. She traveled modestly, gave small gifts generously, and lived in a way that honored the lessons of the past. Wealth, in her eyes, was not noise or display. It was silence, a quiet assurance beneath her every step. Reflection. True wealth grows not in noise, but in the calm assurance of enough. The legacy of calm. Time moved forward, and Lena grew older within the shelter of her home. The mortgage had become a distant memory, yet its lessons remained alive. She began to think often about what would remain after her. The walls she had freed from debt would outlive her, carrying the echo of her patience. She wrote letters to younger relatives, telling them the story of her mortgage, not as numbers, but as a path of endurance. She wanted them to know that freedom is rarely instant. It is carved slowly, line by line, payment by payment, choice by choice. Her calm became her gift. Friends who visited noticed the stillness in her house. They felt it in the way she spoke, in the unhurried tone of her words. The calm of mortgage freedom had seeped into her being, and it spread gently to others. On her porch one evening, watching the sun slip below the horizon, she whispered to herself, "This is the untold calm." Not the absence of struggle, but the peace earned through it. The house glowed in twilight, silent and secure. It no longer represented debt, nor even ownership, but legacy, a testament that even in finance, even in struggle, there lies a path to serenity. Reflection. The calm we build becomes a legacy, carried not only in walls, but in the lives we touch. Seasons of stability. Years moved in gentle procession. The house, once a symbol of duty, now stood as a guardian of stability. Lena watched seasons change outside her window, the blossoms of spring, the heavy warmth of summer, the golden quiet of autumn, and the snow that wrapped the world in silence. Each season carried with it the calm reminder that she was free. She no longer measured her days in payments or deadlines. Instead, she marked them in simple joys, the sound of rain on her roof, the laughter of neighbors' children, the smell of bread in her kitchen. The absence of financial weight allowed her to notice the presence of small blessings. In stability, she discovered depth. She did not chase more, nor did she dwell on what was lost. She lived within the gentle truth that enough was not just sufficient, it was abundant. Reflection. When stability settles into our lives, abundance is found in the smallest of moments, the wisdom of restraint. With freedom came choice, and with choice came reflection. Lena understood that wealth could easily be consumed if not guided by restraint. She remembered how discipline during her mortgage years had shaped her, and she carried that same wisdom forward. She spent less on fleeting pleasures and more on lasting peace. She fixed what could be repaired, cherished what she already owned, and refused the endless cycle of wanting. In her garden, she grew herbs and flowers, not for profit, but for the quiet comfort they brought her. Her restraint was not deprivation, it was clarity. She had lived both with debt and without it, and she knew that the calm of freedom could only be preserved by gentle stewardship. Reflection. Freedom without restraint fades into noise. With restraint, it deepens into peace. The closing circle. As the years stretched further, Lena began to see her life as a circle. The home she had once struggled to claim now held her in comfort. The debts that had once overshadowed her days had long since disappeared, leaving only wisdom in their place. She often sat by the fireplace in the evenings, thinking of her younger self signing that first contract. She wished she could reach back and whisper to that version of herself. The years will be long, but you will endure. The burden will shape you, and the end will be worth every patient step. Her journey was not dramatic, nor filled with sudden fortune. It was quiet, steady, and deeply human. She realized that this kind of story was rarely told, yet it was the story most people lived. To carry debt, to walk through it, to emerge free. It was not grand, but it was profound. Reflection. The stories we live quietly are often the ones that shape us most deeply. The Untold Calm. One evening, Lena wrote a final note in her old ledger, though the debts had long been erased. She wrote not numbers, but words. This home is free. This life is calm. She closed the book gently, as if sealing a chapter that had taken decades to write. The house around her was still, bathed in soft lamplight. Outside, the night stretched across the sky, steady and eternal. In that stillness, she felt no urgency, no burden, no weight. She belonged wholly to her life, and her life belonged wholly to her. Mortgage freedom had not made her rich in coins alone. It had made her rich in time, in calm, in lessons that would live beyond her years. The walls she owned, the quiet she nurtured, the patience she embodied. These were the true wealth she carried. And so, in the final turning of her story, she whispered to herself the words she had come to know deeply. The calm of freedom is not loud nor swift. It is untold until we live it. Reflection. In the end, the quiet we earn becomes the greatest story we tell.